What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 271 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk about an adaptation of a novel, or at least an adaptation of part of a novel. This is Interview with the Vampire, Claudia's story. This is based on the Anne Rice novel. This is adapted by Ashley Marie Witter. And this is specifically the story of Claudia, who is the little child that Lestat and Louis take in for a good portion of the book Interview with the Vampire. Now, I have not read Interview with the Vampire, the novel, but I have seen the movie. So I was pretty familiar with this story. There were a few things here that are different than they were in the movie, and I'm assuming what happens here is what happens in the book. I have no reason to believe that this takes any liberties with the story that it is adapting, but there are a couple things here too that I'm thinking of right off the bat that did not happen in the movie. So if you're like me, if you've seen the movie but you haven't read the book and then you read this, there are a few things that might surprise you. When I first started reading this, I was thinking, okay, this is just going to be exactly what we saw in the movie. It's not going to add anything new. If you've already seen the movie, then I was thinking you probably wouldn't need to read this book. But the further I got into it, I became enthralled with the character of Claudia. And I didn't think that it could make that much of a difference telling the same story that we've already seen, but from the perspective of another character. I really like this quite a bit. Now, I am only a casual fan of Anne Rice. Like I said, I've seen Interview with the Vampire. The first time I saw it, I really loved it. The second time I saw it, I didn't love it nearly as much. I've never read any of the novels, so this was a good little surprise for me that I became this interested and this engaged in the character of Claudia. I really like her struggles here, even when she is a borderline antagonist towards Louis, who is the main character of the novel. At times, she is almost psychotic. Like, she's very scary at times in this story. At times, you can still sympathize with her here. I don't know if you can sympathize with her that much in the novel because you're seeing the events of the story from Louis' perspective there. But here, I really like her, and I came to be very invested with her, even though I know how this story ends. And also, if you do like this adaptation quite a bit, then obviously you can go and read Interview with the Vampire, and you will get a lot more to this story, because, like I said, this only takes up roughly 2/3 of the novel, what I'm assuming happens in the novel. If the plot of the novel is anything like the plot of the movie, then this adaptation takes up roughly 2/3 of the novel. There's quite a bit of stuff that happens before Claudia is turned into a vampire, and stuff that happens after the events of this book. And I won't go into what happens at the end of this in case you haven't read or seen Interview with the Vampire. But I like this. It was surprising how it was able to make me care about Claudia, even though at times she is basically the bad guy of the story, or at least she is more of a bad guy than Louis is. Maybe not quite as much of a bad guy as Lestat, or maybe she is. That's kind of left to interpretation. Lestat is one of those characters, I guess he's the forerunner of characters like Spike from Buffy, or Damon Salvatore from The Vampire Diaries, where they start off as a bad guy, but then the further you get into the lore, the more you start to feel for them, the more they start to become their own leading man. And Lestat here, he's also in his own way kind of a bad guy, but then at one point in the book, you start to feel sorry for him too a little bit. And that's kind of the same way that I felt about him in the movie. But I like this quite a bit. Now, the artwork here is very much, it feels like a manga. Now, it's not read like a manga. It's read from left to right instead of right to left like manga traditionally is. But the artwork here, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe I could just show you a page from it. But it kind of reminds me of, and this is going to sound a little bit sexist, but the manga that is generally geared towards girls. Not a big, huge, muscle-bound action hero manga. So I just got finished talking about Dragon Ball for a little over a week not that long ago. And this artwork is not like Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z. This is a lot more like something that would be geared towards girls. And this is drawn by a girl, so I can't imagine that that's an accident. But here's some of the artwork from this book. I hope you can see that okay. The characters, they very much look like something that you would see in a romance manga. And I don't know any good examples because I don't read a whole lot of manga. But if this sounds interesting to you, if you are not even a big fan of Interview with the Vampire, but this still sounds interesting to you, I would recommend that you read it. But maybe first familiarize yourself with the novel or the movie. Depending on how fast of a reader you are, it would take me like 6 months to read the novel, but if you don't want to be spoiled on the main meat of Interview with a Vampire, maybe go ahead and watch the movie before you read this, because this will spoil some of the stuff that happens in Louis' story, which is, I would call that the main thrust of Interview with a Vampire. So maybe go ahead and familiarize yourself with that before you read this, or if you don't care about Louis' story, if you don't care about Interview with a Vampire, but this story sounds interesting to you, the story of a child who's like 5 or 6, and then she has to deal with being an immortal and the stresses involved with that. If that sounds interesting to you, but you don't care about the rest of Interview with a Vampire, then go ahead and check this out. I would give this a positive review, and I would definitely recommend it pretty much to anybody, fan of Interview with the Vampire, fan of Anne Rice, or not. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Claudia's story. I hope that you guys liked this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.